Here we will see reverse proxy deployment model of Kestrel web server. Kestrel is a default web server for ASP.NET Core application which supports two major deployment models, standalone deployment and reverse proxy deployment. Here we will see reverse proxy deployment model. Kestrel is a lightweight high performance cross-platform server which is built into ASP.NET Core, but it lacks advanced front-end pricing management capabilities which are required for public internet. For production, deploying Kestrel behind a reverse proxy is heavily recommended to enhance security, scalability and load management. In production, Kestrel is usually placed behind a reverse proxy server such as Internet Information Services, that is IIS, Nginx and Apache HTTP server. Working of reverse proxy deployment model is: first, the end user initializes an HTTP or HTTPS request from their browser. Then the request targets the public IP address and the standard port which is managed by the reverse proxy server. The reverse proxy server then handles the raw connection and it gives SSL or TLS termination, that is, decrypts the HTTP request using its local SSL certificate, reducing CPU load on the .NET application. Then security and filtering. Here the proxy filters manages the rate limiting and protects against DDoS threats. And static file optimization. If the request is for static asset like image, CSS or JS file, the proxy server serves it directly from disk and bypass the Kestrel entirely. Then request forwarding to Kestrel. For dynamic application routes, the proxy translates the request and forwards it internally. Communication happens over localhost or a fast local name pipe. It also gives header enrichment, that is, the proxy appends specific X forward headers so the Kestrel knows the client's actual original details. Then Kestrel execution and application pipeline. Kestrel receives the internal HTTP request from the proxy. It instantiates the HTTP context object. The request moves sequentially through the configured ASP.NET Core middleware pipeline to generate a response, and then it returns response loop. Kestrel handles the finalized HTTP response object back to the reverse proxy. Then the proxy applies any final response notification. Then the proxy sends the secure encrypted response back across to the internet to the client browser. Advantages of reverse proxy deployment models are: port sharing. Kestrel cannot share the same IP address and port across multiple background processes. A reverse proxy solves this by listening on public port and routing traffic to unique internal Kestrel ports. Then defense in depth security. It limits the public network surface area. It hides Kestrel's internal IP address from direct exposure, which protects it from targeted attacks like distributed denial of services. Then static file caching. Dedicated web servers are much faster at serving static content than Kestrel. The proxy caches these elements to lower the processing load on your ASP.NET Core application. Then load balancing. A proxy easily distributes the web traffic across multiple underlying Kestrel instances. This prevents any single app instance from failing due to sudden traffic spikes. Then security layer. It limits the public surface area, which act as a buffer against web-facing attack. Then TLS and SSL offloading. The proxy manages public SSL certificates and decrypts requests, which communicate internally via plain HTTP to reduce app overhead. And traffic control. It offers native load balancing, static file caching, request comparison and URL rewriting. Then disadvantages are: increase the complexity. Running an extra network layer means configuring and maintaining two separate pieces of software. The misconfiguration between these can break the routing. Then single point of failure. If the reverse proxy crashes, the entire application becomes completely unreachable even if the underlying Kestrel server is still healthy and running perfectly. Header forwarding requirements. Kestrel loses direct access to the original client's IP address, protocol and domain because it sees the proxy as a client. Developers must manually configure forward headers middleware in the ASP.NET Core to retrieve this data. Then latency overhead. Introducing an intermediary proxy server adds a minimal extra network for every incoming request and outgoing response. And resource consumption. Maintaining a distinct server process requires extra CPU and memory allocations on the hosting infrastructure.